We're continuing to talk about soulful living. And last week we talked about authentic power, distinguishing that from external power. And we raised the idea that external power is known oftentimes as the power over others, manipulation, trying to affect, control, using power in a way that can change the outer, change circumstances, change the landscape of our life in a way that makes it unnecessary for us to have to adjust. Don't you know, there's a part of us that is addicted, in some sense, to this idea of external power. And I'm not just talking about when someone is flexing their muscles, but just flexing our egos. You know, when my preferences for life to be different convince me that life needs to change in order for me to be okay. That's how external power arises and is given life out of that notion. It's an outside-in approach to well-being. And it seems to have worked. Or it seems to work until it doesn't. And then we begin to ask the question, like Dr. Phil would say, how's that working for you? And if we're introspective in the least, we'll notice that life becomes impossible in that attitude, because I don't know how successful you are with keeping plates spinning in your own life, just with your own agendas. But then to have to somehow have the capacity and the ability and the requirement that everything else needs to be spinning the way that you need it to spin, including the way people are spinning their words to you and how they're showing up and how life is doing what it's doing. We've given it an impossible job. Yeah. So this leads us to recognize that if we are going to evolve as a species, we need to find another way to wield power. This pursuit of external power has produced this survival of the fittest sort of notion of evolution, but it also generates conflict between lovers, communities, superpowers, and maybe has brought us to the edge of its usefulness and maybe to the edge of our own demise if we don't rein in that kind of power. Not everybody knows this. And we can see evidence that it still is the go-to method of dealing with our lives. That can be cause for alarm, but it can also be cause for us to recognize that we have a part to play in the evolution of mankind. That if we're recognizing this for ourselves, then it's incumbent upon us to take that recognition and translate it into effective realization and expression, so that we can, as we sing at the end of our services, let it begin with me. Let it begin with me. You know, any kind of transformation, as much as we would like it for our brother-in-law or or our boss or our lovely partner. Real transformation is only possible within you. And I don't like this because there's a part of me that sometimes wakes up when I think about situations in my life that are particularly challenging, and I would like them to change. And I would sometimes start going into a strategic planning as to how I would go about making those changes, or how I'd like to tell people how they need to change. But that's coming from a place that has me devoid of my spiritual reality. Because what we affirm here as we start our service is that there's only one presence and one power in the universe, and in my life, God the good, that living, loving presence of God. And if that is true, then that means that I have the capacity within myself to experience love and experience peace and experience well-being and to experience life on life's terms and be okay. So if I am going out and trying to change life and change people and put this demand upon the universe to be a particular way, then I am belying the truth that I am maintaining is the ultimate truth. That I am saying one thing and doing another. It's incongruent. Some would even say it's blasphemy. And I'm really interested, and here's the tipping point, is that if you're at least as much interested in the power of this authentic power, which is the recognition of your own ability to muster a sense of who you are and your well-being and a deep river of love and peace in you, if you're at least as interested in seeing how that's true as you are in the tendency to want to see how the world needs to change, then you can be on the right path. And it starts with awareness. And I think every one of us probably hasn't had an experience in our life where, we've sort of come to the end of that old story, where we have tried to, beat the world into submission and whoever was in our path, to try to make life be a certain way so that we would be okay. And then we realize time and time again that it just brings us up against this lie. And the impossibility of that, and then the lie that it actually you cannot change people. I mean, how much luck have you had? It's really a good thing that we can't change people all that well, because this external power would have a much longer shelf life. And so what happens is, and maybe some areas of our life are more vulnerable than others to this realization. It's really helpful when we get this, particularly in regard to relationships with other people. When I discovered that I couldn't change my wife, for example, it was a day of grief, I'll tell you that. It was a period of grief, let's be honest. Really, okay. And so there's two things that come from that when you realize that you can't change what's going on out here particularly well. One is it sort of relieves you from having to try, which sort of is a lovely thing, because it takes an inordinate amount of energy to try to change somebody. And when you get zero results, or virtually zero results, and the only results you get come with resentment, then that's a lovely thing. The second phase of that transition or that realization, though, is when you realize that in order for you to continue your search for happiness, the pursuit of happiness that we're all entitled to, then in order for that to be realized, and if I can't change what's going on out here, then that must mean that it has something to do with me. And I'm not saying how much of it does, but I'm in the picture because my happiness is what's at risk here. or what's in question. So that's sort of like the recognition and the realization that is like a splash of cold water. It is both shocking and transformative. It's both difficult to deal with and a path to liberation. It is actually the path to freedom. Because freedom means that it is within my power. It is within my ability to have this sense of well-being. The opposite of freedom is an insistence upon life needing to be a particular way, and I can't make it happen that way. And then I am enslaved to the external world, that I am subject to what's happening outside of myself, as opposed to being responsible and responsive instead of reactive. So anyway, that's what we're up to here, and I wanted to sort of go over it again because it's so important. It just seems like it's just at the source of our growth, is this recognition. And so I wanted to say that again, and I wanted to go on today to continue this exploration, but talk about the basis by which we can achieve this recognition more authentically. That what is the capacity that you and I have to be with life in a way that is on its own terms, and in order to have a different experience than resistance or all of the negative things we can think of. We can think of resistance as being not wanting life to be a particular way, and then of course we can have all kinds of grumbles and murmurs about that. But what has served us up till now has been this way of processing life according to the five senses. And in the book that I mentioned last week that we've been looking at, The Seat of the Soul, Gary Zukov says, the five-sensory exploration of physical reality cannot comprehend evolution without time or the influence of the present upon the past. They cannot meaningfully represent the existence of a soul. And as wonderful as our senses are, you know, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, feeling, they have their limits. And when we are looking through life and processing life only through our senses, we are going to get a limited capacity to deal with life. And those senses work in concert with our intellect. The senses give the data to the intellect is able to analyze and compare and give us a version of reality, but it's only a superficial version of reality. And it is the kind that can cause us to suffer because it doesn't have any capacity to do anything other than what I just mentioned. It doesn't have the capacity to intuit. It doesn't have the capacity for compassion. Doesn't have the capacity for understanding the non-physical reality, that which cannot be seen with the eyes and the senses. So he says, the time has come for a higher order of logic and understanding. The logics and understanding of the five-sensory personality originate in the mind, and they are products of the intellect. But the higher order of logic and understanding that is capable of meaningful reflecting the soul comes from the heart. I thought I gave it away, but maybe it's not up there. It's good that you're not looking up there, but you know. The creation of this higher order of logic and understanding requires close attention to, see if you can guess this one. Feelings. Oh, those. Feelings. He says your emotions show you which parts of your personality are aligned with your soul and which parts are not. Without awareness of your emotions, you cannot see the dynamics that lie behind your emotions or the ends that these dynamics serve. And so heart is at the heart of authentic power. Heart is at the heart of any new potential that we would want to bring forth in our life. It's at the heart of this evolutionary paradigm that's wanting us to become multisensory beings, the universalis, the human universalis, the universal human, not the one that is limited to this body-mind limited sense of self. And of course, when we say heart, sometimes people think, oh, that's Valentine's Day and romantic, mushy. It's not the kind of heart we're talking about. We're talking about a healthy, grounded, constructive, that most loving part of your essence, of who you are. Without the heart, it's not possible for us to create this authentic power. Because the heart, unlike the intellect or the senses, has the capacity to simply be with life. It is the resilience of the heart that allows us to presence ourselves into life as it's showing up to us, and to presence ourselves with other people. And even though there's a part of us that can understand that we disagree with that, or we would like life to be a different way, the heart has this ability to create a sense of oneness, of connection, of compassion. It's the ability to understand life as the field, not just the particle, not just the circumstance. It experiences life as this unified field. And it allows us to go beyond the senses. Jesus said, do not judge by appearances. He was talking about this very idea that instead of just judging life as to how it looks and feels and touch and tastes and all that, what the physical senses tell us and what the intellect is trying to make sense out of it, is to look beyond that, is to allow our vision to go beyond what the eyes perceive. And people like Einstein said things like, in order for us to do the impossible, we have to see the what? Any Einstein students here? Just to do the impossible, one must be able to see the invisible. Invisible. And you say, how can you see the invisible? Well, your eyes do not perceive the invisible, but your heart perceives the invisible. And it's not a visual that we're looking at. It's a known sense. And this idea of intuition. I think women do this better than men. I don't mean to be gender specific here, but I tend to see that women who are maybe more centered in their heart have this capacity to know. And they can't tell you why they know, they just know. And the knowing does not satisfy the intellect. The intellect goes, well, how do you know? Give me some evidence, Where's the data? Give me the rational explanation for how you know. But the capacity to know, there's a connection to the field. There's a connection to the non-physical, that which we cannot measure, at least up until now, with our scientific measures. There is communication that's going on. There's a sensing into this non-physical reality, which is perhaps even more fundamental and more real than anything that we see with the eyes and sense with the senses. So it's not possible for us to create authentic power unless we're centered in the heart. It's not possible to bring our gifts that we were born to give. I know that my transition into doing this particular work in my life, as opposed to doing a very rational, business-oriented job for 20 years before, had to do with that I was completely in my intellect, completely in my head, and I had no sense of understanding myself from anything other than my mind, my head. Does anyone relate to this? Stuck in my head. And the often told story is, the hardest journey, the longest journey is the 18 inches from here to here, particularly for some of us. It's a long journey. But it's that journey that and it isn't just about like, okay, now I'm just going to become this mushy, sentimental person because I have an access to this heart understanding. It's actually that you become a whole person. You know, we're all androgynous beings. We have male and female characteristics and physical characteristics, but our true nature is whole, and to be in. That we can be rational and we can be intuitive, and it's all a part of us growing and evolving into all of who we've come here to be. And so for me, I was sitting in a Unity church 25 years ago, whatever it was, and I was listening to this message, and I was trying to figure it out. What's this guy saying? You know, I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to make sense of it. And I looked over at Denise, and she was crying. And I thought, well, I know what he's saying, but she was feeling what he was pointing to. I was trying to take the words at face value. And he was pointing us to this deeper truth. And because she had access to this portal called the heart, she was able to let that in. And then there was this flood of recognition of the truth of her being. And I was still trying to make sense of it with my mind. And I think this is good counsel for us today. Because when we look out at the appearance in the world of life, wow, if we're just using our intellect and our senses, it's not a good news day. It's not. I don't know about you, but lately it's just like one darn thing after another. And if we're just stuck with trying to make sense of it through our senses and try to understand the sort of the craziness of how the world sometimes unfolds before us, then we're going to be stuck with having zero resiliency and zero capacity to see it in a way in which we can actually be a part of healing, of changing for the better. And I know that when I'm stuck in my intellect, when I'm looking at life in a particular way and I'm just coming from my mind, I don't have good resources. I have just very limited ways of responding. But when I move into my heart, if I can get to that place, if I can just call off the sort of pushing back against life, then I see it in a whole new way. And then my responses are new. My responses are multisensory. My responses I may have the capacity to just do nothing, the capacity to just try to understand, the capacity to just allow things to be, the capacity to offer some compassion, to try to have empathy and understand what someone is doing, what's behind what they're doing, it's behind what they're saying, so that it isn't just me judging the appearance or judging the circumstance. And the heart has the capacity to do that, because the heart is part of your wholeness. It's never diminished. I'm not talking about the heart that breaks. I'm talking about the heart of your being, that it has the capacity to be with life no matter what. We do see this evidenced in mothers oftentimes, is their capacity to remain in that loving space no matter what their child does. I think that's beyond just the heart of a mother. I think that's what I'm talking about this morning. It's this divine heart. Never loses sight of the innocence of the child of God in every person. That's what we're invited to do. If we want to evolve individually or have our species evolve, we can't do it without the heart. I love this quote from The Little Prince. It says, "And now here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." What is essential is invisible to the eye. And so you and I, I'm sure, are coming to recognize that what is essential in this world, in this life, is for us to be able to have an evolved response ability to what is showing up, whether it's in our own personal relationships or what's happening in the world. And that it serves us to become more familiar with this capacity to be oriented and referenced from the heart space. And sometimes for me, it's just a matter of me, I'm thinking about something, I'm analyzing and I'm criticizing it, and I'm doing this sort of critical analysis, trying to figure it out, and why did he do that, and why did she say that, and what's, all of that sort of figuring out. And it's just nothing but suffering after a while. It doesn't lead anywhere good, right? It usually leads with some kind of reaction, yeah? But if I can finally just let go of that, just have it run, it has to have its time. It needs its time. And then just allow myself to just relax and begin to breathe into the heart. Just breathe into the heart. So here, close your eyes for a moment. Let's just do this together. So there's a situation in your life right now, just whatever that first one pops up that you're having some challenge with. It could be personal. Well, let's let it just be personal for now. But not a 9 on the scale of 1 to 10. Let's work with a 4 or a 5. This is when we have a short service. I can't do miracles in this short time. But let's take something that's still bothering you and just bring it to mind so you can name it. But don't get the whole box of 64 crayons out and put in all the details. Let's just name it as, my relationship with Bob or whatever it is, or a situation with work or something like that. Now, you have an opinion about it, I'm sure, and which usually comes from the intellect and the senses. I was going to ask you, just let go of it for this time being and move into the heart space. And the easiest way to do that for many people is just to begin to breathe into the heart. So it's as if as you take breath in, you just feel the air coming in. Of course, it's coming into your lungs, but feel it as it's like massaging your heart and it's expanding your heart. That your heart is just opening with each in-breath. Just growing beyond the physical confines of your body even. The heart just is this part of you that has no confines. And then when you breathe out, just let go of any tension. And with it, let go of anything in the story, those stories, those facts. And let's just do this for a minute or so. Just breathe into the heart. And then on the out-breath, just let go. And one more time. And now with this situation sort of in the back of your mind, what does the heart know? What does the heart know? What does the heart know about this situation? Just allow that wisdom to be with you now, and you can work with this again. It's just a wonderful way to move into the heart and then ask the question, what does your heart know about this? And so you can open your eyes. This is how we evolve our souls. This is how we align our personality with our souls so that our response ability to life can be infused with the grander sense of self that we are, the spiritual self that we are. This is what I know works in my life, and I know it's what I need to continue to do more and more. I need to not just stop when I have a reaction to life, but I need to move into that space of the heart. I think it can serve us for all of the challenging moments that are ahead of us. It is every spiritual teacher, every spiritual master has had some kind of teaching around this to move us into this place where we know that there is, that who and what we truly are is spiritual and is safe. And we can be grounded in that place. Then we can decide what's ours to do. Whether it's to serve the people in Guatemala, whether it's to respond in a more loving way to someone who's difficult, whether it's to see someone beyond the appearance which has you coloring them in a way that is less than loving, is to try to be more empathic, to see what someone might be going through in order for them to do and say what they say and do. It's very useful. It's how we evolve. It's how we can be more of who we've come here to be and make sense out of this world, because there's a place for us in it to be of use and to be of value and to make our contribution as who God created us to be. Amen? Amen. Namaste.